Leaky gut keeps showing up in wellness content and rarely gets explained properly, particularly because doctors and other healthcare professionals don't recognize it as a true diagnosis, which it's not, and we'll get to that in a bit. The result is that women either dismiss it as pseudoscience or get frightened into buying something they may not need and could make their symptoms worse. Neither of these is a good outcome. In this video, I will explain what the intestinal barrier actually is, how it's supposed to work, what goes wrong in leaky gut, what causes it, including that sometimes our own bodies make it leaky on purpose, and sometimes become leaky as a result of hormonal changes in midlife, what leaky gut leads to, and what can protect us from it. My name is Stephanie Dunn. I'm a registered dietitian and the founder of Feed Your Intention. I guide women to nourish their wellness and reclaim their wholeness. In this video, I am going to give you a lot of information because I want you to be fully informed. So grab a cup of tea or some sparkling water and let's dig in. The first thing I want to explain to you is what the intestinal barrier actually is. You can think of your digestive system as being a long tube that starts at your mouth and honestly ends at your anus. That tube goes through your esophagus, through your stomach, and then gets to your small intestine and eventually your large intestine. Now, your small intestine and large intestine are simply tubes. You can think of them like a really long tube made out of bricks and mortar, where the bricks are the intestinal cells themselves, and the mortar that is holding those bricks together is what are called tight junctions. Now, under normal physiological conditions, your body digests food. Those individual nutrients are then absorbed into the intestinal cell and come out the cell on the other side into the bloodstream. And this is by design because your intestinal cells are incredible gatekeepers. They know what should get into your body and what should stay out. So the mechanism by which the body protects itself is to only allow nutrients to go into the intestinal cell and come out the other side. The exception to this is some small molecules such as water and some minerals like potassium can be absorbed directly through the tight junctions. That is the mortar that holds the bricks together. It can passively filter through when the molecules are small enough. When the gut is leaky, what that means is that it has become hyperpermeable. So hyper means more than normal, and you know what permeable means. So the official definition of leaky gut is intestinal hyperpermeability. Now, when that happens, the cells are continuing to do what they are supposed to do. In other words, they allow nutrients in that are supposed to get in and nutrients to then flow into the bloodstream. However, the tight junctions loosen or end up with gaps between them. And they now are allowing things to leak into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there and aren't having to go through the filtering process that the intestinal cells themselves provide. This means that undigested food, toxins, and microorganisms, either all of the microorganism or even parts of the microorganism, can now leak into the bloodstream because they are no longer being kept out by the barrier of an intact intestinal wall with those bricks and mortar keeping that intestine tube solid. One of the strangest things I learned about leaky gut is that while it is often caused by external influences that we will get to in a minute, your body can open the gaps on purpose. Now, when I was in grad school, I learned that gluten is not negatively impactful to the body unless a person has celiac disease. But once I began my additional certifications, there was a lot of talk about gluten and the impact it can have in the body. And as I understood that more, I found out about a protein called zonulin. Now, zonulin was founded by a scientist and researcher named Dr. Alessio Fasano, who works out of Boston's Mass General Hospital, or at least he did. I'm not sure if he is actually still at that institution or not. But he discovered zonulin, and zonulin is a protein made by the intestinal cells when the intestines are triggered to release it. Now, the only known physiological impact of zonulin is that it relaxes the tight junctions, meaning that the body has the ability to produce a protein that will relax the tight junctions on purpose. And I will tell you, when I found this out, I was actually really appalled and frustrated that I had not learned about this during my master's program, because the research by Dr. Fasano had been published, the initial research had been published 10 years before I was learning about it in my advanced certification. So I was really frustrated that it had never been mentioned throughout my master's program or in my studies to become a registered dietitian. So I want to tell you a bit more about how this protein actually got discovered. As often happens with science, Dr. Fasano was studying the bacteria that causes cholera. Its official name is Vibrio cholerae, and this bacteria produces a toxin called zonal occludens toxin, or ZOT for short. The bacterium's purpose for producing ZOT is to pry open the space between the cells, to literally put holes in the tight junctions. In Fasano's curiosity, he asked a most interesting question. If a bacterium could evolve a key to unlock the space between the tight junctions, does the human body also have a key that fits the same lock? He found that it does, and he named it zonulin. Now, as I mentioned, zonulin is the only known substance created by the human body whose purpose is to loosen the tight junctions. As we will see in a minute, it's not the only thing that can loosen the tight junctions. It's just the only thing that the human body produces that can do this. And with everything else in the human body, this isn't a design flaw, although at first glance it could seem like it is. Zonulin appears to be a defense mechanism. A way to flush unwanted bacteria out of the small intestine is part of our innate immunity, meaning the part of our immune system that we are born with, not the one we develop over time as a result of exposure to illness-causing microorganisms. So the problem isn't the presence of zonulin itself, or even that it's working the way it was intended to. The problem is when the internal environment causes zonulin to be released too readily or allows the gaps in the tight junctions to stay open for too long. The two most powerful triggers of zonulin release are, number one, gram-negative bacteria such as E. coli and the bacteria that causes salmonella being in the small intestine, and number two, gliadin, which is a fragment of gluten. Now, I know people get tired of gluten getting a bad rap, but the reality is that research has shown, for going on 2 decades now, that gluten triggers the release of zonulin, even in people who don't have celiac disease. It seems to happen in pretty much everyone. Now, how much zonulin gets released and what kind of impact zonulin has in the intestines varies from person to person. As well, there are still some unanswered questions about zonulin, including whether or not it's actually just one protein made by the body or several similar proteins. And if there are more than one similar protein, do they all impact the intestines in the same way? As well, there is debate about whether or not commercial blood tests for zonulin are reliable. Meaning, do they actually measure this thing they say they are measuring, or are they measuring what is potentially a family of related proteins? In addition to that, it's not clear how blood levels of zonulin correlate with zonulin in the intestines. These caveats are not to say that zonulin isn't real or that it relaxes tight junctions. No one is debating its existence or its effects. Rather, what's still under question is how well we can measure it, both during scientific studies and for the everyday person. Now, going back to something I introduced in that last section when we talked about cholera's ability to produce ZOT, it turns out Vibrio cholerae is not special in this regard. Multiple microorganisms have the ability to unlock or pry open the tight junctions. Bacteria such as E. coli, C. difficile, H. pylori, Campylobacter, and Salmonella have all been implicated. For example, Campylobacter jejuni secretes an enzyme that breaks down Claudin 8. Claudin 8 is one of the sealing proteins in the tight junctions. So the Campylobacter secretes the enzyme, the protein in the tight junctions breaks down, and now there is a gap for anything to cross through. Candida, which is a type of function, does something similar. It secretes a peptide toxin called candidialysin that damages the intestinal cells themselves and disrupts the tight junctions. Unfortunately, a healthy intestinal wall and tight junctions protect us from a candida invasion, meaning that just because you have some candida in your intestines does not mean you'll have an overgrowth of it, nor that it will cause a leaky gut. When we support our gut health, our intestinal cells are better able to withstand the attack on the barrier. Parasites like Giardia also secrete enzymes that break down tight junction proteins like ZO1, claudin-1, claudin-4, and occludin. And you want to hear something crazy? The same enzymes that can break down the tight junctions also degrade the messengers created by the immune system to call for help when they realize the barrier has been breached. These little things, since I shouldn't use a curse word on camera, literally open the barrier and muffle the alarm. I mean, it's ingenious and fascinating and frustrating. To add to this, the effects of these harmful microorganisms can be felt even after the microorganism has been cleared. If you've ever thought your gut hasn't been quite right since you had food poisoning or since a trip you took years ago, it's because these microorganisms change the environment of the intestines. And that change can persist if the right support isn't given and balance isn't truly restored. This also explains why just take a probiotic is not a gut health plan. If one of these microorganisms is actively working against your gut health, you have to address that before introducing beneficial bacteria, which are only beneficial when they actually stay in your intestines. Beyond zonulin and the microbiome, there are two other processes that can cause a leaky gut. The first is inflammation, and this is a tricky one. I mentioned before that undigested food particles, toxins, and microorganisms can enter the body through the gaps in the tight junctions. What I didn't say is that the majority of your immune cells, when your immune system is in a relaxed state, sit just on the other side of your intestinal wall, because this is the location where unwanted substances are most likely to enter the body. When the immune system detects one of these threats, it gets activated, and this is the definition of inflammation. Literally a response by the immune system to a real or perceived threat or injury. So whether it's zonulin or a microorganism causing the leaky gut, the immune system will now respond with an inflammatory response. However, inflammation can also cause a leaky gut. Multiple cytokines, including TNF-alpha and interleukin-6, activate an enzyme called myosin light chain kinase. You don't need to remember that name. This enzyme makes the intestinal cells contract, so it physically pulls away and the tight junctions open. Now you can see what a vicious cycle this can create. The tight junction opens for whatever reason, the immune system is activated, inflammatory messengers cause the intestinal cells to contract, the junctions open further, and repeat. It feeds itself. But this also means that inflammation in the body, not caused by something in the intestines, can potentially lead to a leaky gut also. This is why a leaky gut can be persistent and why removing one trigger sometimes isn't enough. Of course, I don't want to be all doom and gloom because there are other immune messengers like interleukin-10, which is anti-inflammatory and protects the function of the intestinal barrier. So our goal isn't to shut down the immune system or seal up the intestines like a bunker. Rather, it's to provide support and find balance so the intestines stay healthy and strong. The last known trigger for leaky gut is chronic stress. I have mentioned the impact stress has on blood sugar control and cholesterol levels. And here is one more way that stress impacts our health and well-being. Stress opens the tight junctions by activating mast cells. These mast cells release inflammatory messengers like TNF-alpha and interferon gamma, and these messengers loosen the tight junctions. So if we really want to achieve gut health, we have to work toward calming the immune system. And this includes reducing our stress so that our stress isn't the ultimate root cause of the inflammation that is causing the leaky gut. For those of us women in midlife, I have to add one more thing to this story about leaky gut. and that is the impact the hormonal changes of perimenopause and postmenopause have. Among all the things estrogen does to support our bodies, one of them is that it supports the integrity of our intestinal barrier. It tells the body to make more tight junction proteins so that the tight junctions are strong and constantly renewing themselves. Estrogen also provides some anti-inflammatory effects so that there are fewer inflammatory cytokines floating around. And finally, estrogen protects the mucus-producing cells in the intestines. Now, we haven't talked about this aspect of gut health, but sitting on top of that single layer of cells is a layer of mucus, and this mucus is like a shield, meant to prevent harmful organisms from having access to the intestinal cells themselves. Estrogen supports the cells that make the mucus so the barrier stays strong. I know we hear a lot right now about our skin's barrier and how important it is to protect that to keep our faces looking young. Well, our intestines also have a barrier that needs to be protected. In addition to estrogen support of a healthy gut, progesterone supports occlusion, which is one of the sealing proteins in the tight junctions. As estrogen and progesterone decline during the menopause transition, the support they provide to the tight junctions and the mucus barrier also decline. Not only does permeability increase in the intestines, but the immune system also is more likely to react. Now, this isn't to say that going through the menopause transition will result in you getting a leaky gut. It is not definite. Rather, it's so that you know this incredible phase of life that we are in, where so many of us are coming back to who we truly are, can leave our bodies needing more external support because the internal support we've enjoyed isn't quite the same. Okay, now that we've talked about what leaky gut is and what causes it, let's talk about where it leads. As I mentioned before, a large portion of immune cells sit just on the other side of the intestine walls. When undigested food particles, toxins, and microorganisms cross into the bloodstream through the loose tight junctions, the immune system reacts, and the balance between tolerance and immune reaction gets disrupted. This means that the immune system can become more trigger happy, reacting to things that it didn't before. This might mean new food sensitivities show up or new allergies develop later in life. For people who are genetically susceptible, intestinal hyperpermeability can also mean that an autoimmune condition gets turned on and symptoms start showing up for the first time. In addition to conditions directly related to the immune system, other symptoms can show up as a result of the chronic low-grade inflammation. Symptoms like persistent fatigue, joint pain, brain fog, skin changes, and mood swings. So a leaky gut can have implications throughout your entire body. Now, what do you do about it? Well, the answer, as always, is it depends. Believe me, I know that feels super unhelpful, but I would be doing you a disservice if I told you there was one magical answer to that question. At the same time, I have no intention of leaving you without any guidance or direction. So, at a high level, this is what you do. Number 1, remove any triggers that are currently part of your internal or external environment. This includes addressing any dysbiosis that could be present. If you want more info on gut dysbiosis, you can check out the blog on my website. I'll link it in the description. Number 2, interrupt the inflammation loop by reducing inflammation in your body. Of course, this could be the same as removing triggers mentioned in step 1, but it could also be something different. Things like known food sensitivities and underlying chronic infections all drive low-grade inflammation. Number 3, reduce unnecessary stress as soon and as thoroughly as you can. Number 4, nourish your gut cells and the mucus barrier so the whole protective mechanism can rebuild itself. Number 5, inoculate your intestines with helpful probiotics. And finally, support your hormones if appropriate for where you are in your life. I know this is not a specific protocol that you can follow, and that's not because I'm being coy. It's because I don't know what your root causes are, and I don't want to guess because your root causes could be one or many, and they might be the same as another person or completely different. I remember several years ago, there was a big push by a particular supplement company that everyone with a particular set of symptoms had candida overgrowth and needed to take their supplement in order to get rid of the candida and the symptoms. And the reality is that very few symptoms of chronic conditions, including candida overgrowth, can be tied to one specific root cause. And even if there is one root cause, the solution for that situation can still vary from person to person. What you need in order to heal your gut requires investigation, not a default one-size-fits-all kind of answer. If you aren't sure where to start, I encourage you to work with a practitioner who can guide you on your specific situation, taking into account your triggers, your physiology, your environment, your resources, and your preferences. With that, let me leave you with some hope. Our bodies, and especially our guts, are incredibly resilient. The cells lining the intestine turn over every few days, so a leaky gut is not a permanently damaged system. It is constantly trying to rebuild itself. When we give ourselves the support that we need, particularly the kind of support we need when our bodies are less capable of providing all the support themselves, our bodies will respond. Our tight junctions can close. Our mucus barrier can be restored. And we can find a less stressed, less inflamed, more resilient, stronger way of being in our bodies. If you are wondering if I can help you accomplish this, please contact me for a free 15-minute chat where we can discuss your needs and goals. Next week, we're going to talk about the gut-brain axis and the vagus nerve, so hit the subscribe button so you don't miss even more as it relates to this gut health discussion. Until next time, I wish you wellness and wholeness.